I just want to say a few words today, really about the scriptures that we have this weekend. We've got something of Noah from the book of Genesis, and more especially the Gospel, which is the Markan version, St. Mark's version of the temptations in the desert. They're very brief. The St. Mark tells us that the Spirit drove Jesus out into the desert. Is a very strong word, actually means expelled Jesus out into the desert. The power of the Spirit, which he had received at his baptism, or which had been confirmed in him at his baptism, drove him out into the wilderness. The wilderness, everyone, is an interesting place. Not a nice place. Not a nice place. The Archbishop sent us priests a message there yesterday, in which he goes into some detail as to how terrible and awful a place the desert can be. We think of nice sweeping dunes and lovely caravans of camels and so forth. Well, that's the Hollywood version. The desert, the wilderness, is not a nice place to be, everyone. And that's why Jesus went there. That's why he went there. He went there for 40 days. All you biblical scholars will know exactly why he went for 40 days, because that replicates, in a sense, or it takes us back to, or recapitulates, to use one of my favorite words, it goes back to the 40 years that the Israelites spent in the desert before they got into the promised land. It was a time where they learned a lot, where they got a lot wrong, where they struggled. And yet they were wonderfully blessed. They were blessed with water from the rock. They were blessed with fresh meat, the quails. They were blessed with the manna from heaven. And that was all in the wilderness. But they complained about it. They had a hard time. It wasn't really what they chose. So our Lord goes into the desert, is expelled, is driven by the Spirit into the desert, and he does this in preparation for his public ministry, for the revelation of God's love, which he's about to make. And I think the message is one that's particularly appropriate for these days that we're living in, because in many ways we are in a wilderness. Everyone I've spoken to, I would say, without exception, has said that these times are very difficult. And I don't want to dwell on the difficulty, but to recognize it. They are difficult times. But the message from the scriptures is that difficult times are times when we learn what the Lord's message is. And sometimes, dear friends, and I speak from personal experience, we learn kicking and screaming against the teaching. So what is it that we learn, or we have learned, or are learning from this time of pandemic? And what can we learn from the time of Lent, which is, in a way, because of the disciplines of fasting, prayer, and almsgiving, is a little bit like an experience of the wilderness or of the desert. And I think the answer to that question, what are we learning, is going to be individual, isn't it? Something that it has taught me very strongly has been to be far more attentive to my prayer. And by God's grace, I've managed something of that. And far more attentive to the interruptions of life that otherwise might have made me very impatient to put it mildly, and that somehow, if we do put each day into God's loving hands, there's nothing going to happen that we're not going to be able to cope with. Although sometimes we're asked to bear things which are very heavy. So this is a time of learning for us, a time of growth. It sounds a bit of a strange thing to say that our faith grows in the desert. But if it teaches us a deeper trust and a deeper acceptance of life, of the circumstances of our lives, however awkward, difficult, painful they may be, but that we can trust that the Lord, who went into the desert for our sake and ultimately went to the cross for our sake, that he will never let us down, that he will always find his own creative way of giving us blessing. So that, in a nutshell, is what I feel is important to say today when the Lord is in the wilderness. When I preach at Mass, I'll say a little bit more about being with the wild beasts and the angels, but today my time just happens to be extremely short. So it's been a pleasure to share those thoughts with you. I was happy that we had another session on St. Mark earlier in the day, 9 o'clock this morning, and I hope that others will be happy to join us next Saturday for another session. So, have a blessed weekend and see you soon. God bless. Thank you. Notices for this week. Well, Sunday afternoon, 4 o'clock, we are going to have the stations, and there will be a link on the website for them. We have to do them virtually, and so although I will be in church at 4 o'clock, it's all going to be sent to you, broadcast to you via the internet. And as I mentioned, the fourth of our St. Mark sessions will be next Saturday morning at 9 o'clock. I think when I began, I said there'd be 3 sessions, but I hope you'll continue with all of us for a 4th session, and then there'll be a 5th session using these very helpful little videos from Father Nicholas King. So that's it. Have a blessed week, and bon courage, as they say, and we'll look forward to being in touch again soon. God bless.